The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed on the Nova Society are those of our guests and panel members and do not represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of any institution any member of the Nova Society is associated with. The material information presented on the Nova Society is for general information purposes only. Reproduction or dissemination for the purpose other than education is prohibited without express written consent of the Nova Society. We'd like to welcome everyone back to the Nova Society. Today our panel will be having a conversation regarding an article that we found in the Journal of Higher Education that talked about a new Facebook group called Mothers Against College Antisemitism. And we're going to talk, this is going to be actually a 2 or 3 part series as we talk about this group, their motivations, and what the American people actually do understand, not only about Israel, but about the history of the Middle East. So let's listen in. All right. So actually, I sent this article to Scott.
Okay.
Last week. But it was actually in regards to something totally different.
Okay.
Or as Monty Python would say, and now for something completely different.
Which is good. What is that?
But there is a new group. There is a new group out there on college campuses. With complaints that are flooding administrators with complaints, and they are called Mothers Against College Antisemitism. MACA, I guess, is what it would be.
Okay.
And this was, sometimes these things just come to you. I mean, because like I said, I sent it to Scott, and somebody actually sent me, sent an email to us about this, asking if these kind of groups, such as Mothers Against College Antisemitism, and Moms for Liberty, are just two of the same types of groups, just different sides of the coin. Because it is parents, and this is with college, of course, as opposed for Moms for Liberty, which is actually more to the grade schools. But it is non-educators trying to dictate how education is, what goes on campuses and stuff like that. And I have not really looked in very much to Mothers Against College Antisemitism. The name sounds like it's a worthwhile kind of thing, but some professors are arguing that they want to stifle speech, which would be no different than Moms for Liberty, except in, as I say, the other side of the coin.
I'm not familiar with that.
Or is it the same side of the coin?
It seems well, like that would be my question. I mean, if you're trying, Moms for Liberty tried to ban books. There was that.
They did.
Mothers Against College Antisemitism. My question to that is, and again, it's very difficult to figure out what these organizations are truly about.
You're right.
But all right, Mothers Against College Antisemitism. What define college anti-Semitism to me? What exactly are you talking about when you're talking about that? And just the article that I sent to Scott actually doesn't. It's not specific as to exactly what this group is supposedly talking about.
I wonder if they know what they're talking about.
That's the question. I mean, that is the question.
Where did this group originate? Does it say?
George Washington University. All right, so this is the way the article starts out. Last October, a handful of George Washington, actually, I don't know if it did start George Washington. I'd have to really check up on that. October, a handful of George Washington University students projected slogans, including "Glory to our martyrs," onto a university library named after a Jewish patron. The students said the phrase was meant to honor Palestinians killed by Israel, according to the student newspaper, but many Jewish observers read it as celebrating Hamas' October 7th massacre. So I guess the question, and it comes back to this Mothers Against Anti-Semitism and all these kind of groups that are trying to influence how we think. I mean, I can honestly see where people get different perceptions, on things. I always tell students in my courses, In 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. That's a fact. That's a historical fact. There is no arguing this. But when you then ask the second question, why did he sail? You're going to get a whole bunch of different answers.
Right.
It's all up for interpretation. Is this an interpretation issue? Are we missing something here? Are we calling something anti-Semitism which maybe isn't? I mean, I really have no idea at this point.
Well, it may be, and I was thinking back again to our conversation last week where Scott, you were saying that Israel has a right to defend itself, which I agree with. But at the same time, one of my friends who is Jewish pointed out that for Israel to have full control over Gaza's water, electricity, and for Israel to be able simply to shut everything off at will, that type of control, of course, removes it's like I don't know, parental control. It's like imperialist control or colonial, it's like colonialism, whereby adults, people in Gaza don't have, and here I'm separating people from Gaza who live in Gaza and Palestinians from Hamas. And I recognize that immediately causes a problem because, I mean, who might be supportive of Hamas and who might be genuinely a victim of Hamas and a victim of Israel, who simply happened to be born there and who would like to be peaceful and have a normal life and grow up, go to school and have an education and have opportunity for a future and not be subjected to being used as a human shield and being bombed and whatnot, but to be put in the middle in such a manner where settlers are allowed legally, and I mean it's illegal, but no one really does anything about it because, of course, Israel is a sovereign nation. So people can raise objections to settlers on the West Bank and people taking land that they're not supposed to. People from Israel, for example. But the moment anybody says anything, the tendency is to say, "Oh, well, you're being anti-Semitic," which is not true necessarily. And so as Mark is saying, that is, I think, also a question of interpretation. And my friend, as I said, who is Jewish, was saying this, that a person can be pro not murdering people in Gaza, not murdering innocent Israeli civilians by Hamas, and not supportive of Netanyahu's policies of aggression and control and usurpation and so forth, without being automatically anti-Semitic and hating everybody who happens to be Jewish. So it seems to me that in our American society, at least, I've noticed a tendency, and it seems to me to be built into our educational system, either or, very black and white education. It's either true or false or multiple guess, rather than critical thinking, essays, gradations of right and wrong, and considering ethics and morality and interpretations of meanings and nuances, and how people can hold more, like a tolerance for ambiguity, how people can hold more than one contradictory perspective in mind at the same time. So and I've never heard of this Mothers for or against whatever it is, anti-Semitism. I mean, for people to be, either Jewish students to be beaten up or murdered, for people who happen to be Palestinians to be beaten up and murdered, I mean, in the United States, is completely wrong. I don't see why a person can't support elements of both people and aspects of both situations simultaneously, while animadverting against aspects of both sides and policies, and aspects, and having a very nuanced understanding without having someone say, well, you're a traitor, you're a this, you're a that. People seem to be very universalistic and very either or in their thinking.
Well, they are zero sum. And just to put a little context into this,
yes,
this group was started by Elizabeth Rand, a lawyer. She started this as a Facebook group for people who wanted to do something about anti-Semitism on college campuses. It now has nearly 60,000 members, and it's, according to the article, celebrates wins for the broader movement each week, like a Students for Justice in Palestine chapter getting placed on probation, or a university investigating the removal of Israeli flags as possible hate crimes. Again, it's a zero-sum attitude in many ways. And I guess I'm looking at this and thinking, maybe these people are just like Moms for Liberty, who want to ban books because, they're offended by it in schools. And maybe they are taking this zero-sum attitude toward things. And I just don't know how I guess I wonder why people get involved in these zero-sum kind of group kind of things. 60,000 is a lot of people to be in a Facebook group. That's a bunch of doggone people. And, celebrating that Students for Justice in Palestine getting placed on probation, that's with no context. Who knows what that was truly all about?
And how do they define justice? I mean, are we talking about not children and older people and infants and others not being murdered for no reason and starved and not being allowed to be able to leave? So, I mean, and removing a flag, well, then if you want to remove flags, then nobody should be allowed a flag, or everybody should be allowed flags.
I mean, how do you justify that as a hate crime? I can see if you did something, but removing something, I don't know. How have we now equated that to a hate crime? Scott, what are you thinking?
So this is
I know
really
you're thinking a lot over there.
It's almost hard to know where to begin. So
no kidding.
Without knowing anything about this group, my first assumption, and it's maybe it's wrong. My first assumption is that these are Christians, and that their tie to Israel is based on some kind of apocalyptic vision of the world, and that they're really involved in returning Jesus to the world, and that's what motivates their love of Israel, to which I say thank you, no thank you.
I heard about that.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that she mentioned that really was telling to me in the article, this was a direct quote from her, dismisses the notion that Makkah should not have a say. Her comment was, "We are consumers. If I'm giving you $80,000 a year, you better behave."
Yeah, well, that's ridiculous.
I mean, truly. I mean, to me, that kind of summed it all up. Of okay,
better behave.
so you're like the person that says to the cop, "You can't arrest me because I pay your salary."
Right. It's absurd. Look, I mean, your child applied to go to that school. They really wanted to go to that school. If they wanted to check out who the school invests in, what the, all the nitty gritty of their policies and their divestments and their investments and their, all the other small details of the school, then yeah, go for it and make a decision based on that. Don't all of a sudden turn around and say you're not happy with the school because you don't like what you perceive to be. I don't even know how they know what those are. My assumption is most schools are invested in funds that have a wide variety of investments. And that, among those could be some Israeli companies. What, not a foolish thing to invest in my opinion. Israeli companies, Israeli has been a big leader in tech for a while now. And, look, let me just get down to this, okay? The situation in the Middle East in general, and with regard to Israel, the West Bank, Hamas, Jordan, Egypt, is too complicated for Americans.
Yes.
Just stay out of it. You don't understand. You don't know what it is, and we've ignored enough of our own history here, and completely whitewashed our own history to the point where we don't even know what we do. I mean, I only found out, for example, about what we did to the Native Americans from that Martin Scorsese movie. Had never heard of that Killers of the Flower Moon thing, right? Had never heard of what happened in Oklahoma City in the 1920s. None of this stuff was apparent to me. I saw, last week that some Confederate school names are coming back to schools in Virginia, a couple of schools in Virginia, as if this is something that they really want to sit down and think about. And this is what, is troubling them and on their minds. We got enough issues to deal with here in the United States that we don't have to meddle in the affairs of others. And these students who are going out and protesting have no idea what they're talking about at all. And anybody who hides behind anti-Zionism and saying it's not anti-Semitism, I will refer you to the words of Martin Luther King, who said clearly, and when you say you are anti-Zionist, you are anti-Semitic, because denying Jews their own self-rule is anti-Semitic. The experiment of, keeping Jews around when you want them and destroying them when you don't want them has not worked out well for the Jews. So when people criticize Zionists, they mean Jews. You're talking about anti-Semitism. So we need to be clear about that. Israel has a right to exist. It does exist. It's a fact on the ground. That is a fact, as much as the ocean was blue in 1492. And so people need to get over that. Now, as far as the unfortunate and tragic situation that the people of Gaza find themselves in, I'm also getting a little tired of these poor people narrative is beginning to grate on my nerves, because the more I see of people celebrating their, what they're doing in Gaza, the more I feel, they could, like, if the Israelis handed them guns and said, okay, go take care of Hamas. We'll give you the weapons to do it if you need it. We'll even give you the training to do it, but you need to take back your own country. And I don't think that they would do it. So if they had the ability to do it, they would not choose to do it. So they're complicit in this. And I know that's a harsh thing to say, and I hate seeing children hurt and dying, and the pain of mothers and fathers and others. All of it, is tragic. This is war. This is what it is. It's an ancient human endeavor, tragic to its core, always has been. And I continue to hope that however this resolves itself, that it happens quickly rather than over a really long period of time. As we discussed back on October 8th, we thought that they had a couple of weeks to get this done. They did not, as it turns out, have a couple of weeks. They did not get the understanding of people around the world in Israel to do what they had to do for more than a couple of days. But it's been lingering on for a really long time now. But it's not like they've resolved this problem. And that has to happen. They cannot. There is, as I said last week, there is no left-wing leader in Israel who would turn around and say, well, let's just let Hamas have this back, and we'll go back to things being the way they were on October 6th. It's not going to happen. It cannot happen.
And you make a very good point, Scott, and you made it numerous times. And I was actually talking to a friend the other day, who is also Jewish, and he said, most of the people that from the river to the sea that say that today have no concept of what that really means. They truly do not. Just like you're right, Americans are so ignorant of our own history, of the things that we did, and I would also include the internment of the Japanese Americans during World War II. We didn't inter the Germans, but boy,
actually,
we did.
There were some.
But we interred those Japanese. I mean,
there were some Germans who were interred. Sorry for interrupting you.
Yeah,
but not to the extent.
No, but correct. That is correct.
And it's a similar.
Canada.
Anti-Semitism in America takes form of the people who say you have dual loyalty, right? Or that's some pretty old anti-Semitism right there. And I support Israel, but I am not Israeli. I'm an American, and this is my country. And I support Israel, the way I support a whole bunch of other democracies that are out there. It does have a special place for me as an American Jew that maybe some other countries don't have, but I support them all as long as they're democracies that take care of their people, that do the best that they can. And I don't see a whole lot of that in the rest of the Middle East. It's the people who will argue that when they say from the river to the sea, we mean a one state for everybody who wants to live there, is a denial of the fact that there are 15 million Jews in the world and 1.9 billion Muslims, all of whom could make claims that they should move to what is now Israel and flood it with people who do not want, a Knesset there and don't want Israeli Jewish self-rule in Israel. So these are facetious arguments to me, and they're not worthy even of commenting on. So if you're a for the river to the sea person, you're anti-Semitic, blatantly anti-Semitic, and you need to check that. You need to say to yourself, do I hate Jews, and why? And let it go at that, because it's too complicated for you to think past that. That's the only thing that you need to really work on right now. And if you can get through that, maybe someday we can have a conversation about the wider situation there.
So that's all the time we have for today's episode. The Nova Society is a production of the Phoenix Research Institute. We'd like to thank our sponsors for this episode. BH Conflict Resolution Services, a full-service dispute resolution firm offering expert and cost-effective mediation services to couples, groups, and businesses. BHCRS can be reached at www.bhcrs.com. We'd also like to thank our podcast partners, Buzzsprout, who hosts the Nova Society, Audacity, our editing partners, and Podkite, who does all of our analytics. iHeartRadio, where people get their music and podcasts, Apple iTunes, the largest source for music and podcasts on the internet, Spotify, the most popular source for the Nova Society. The Nova Society is available on all of these and other quality platforms. We'd like to thank all of our listeners. Without you, the Nova Society would not be possible. If you have a comment, question, or would like to be a guest on the Nova Society, we can be reached at nova.society.podcast@gmail.com. Always remember, the power of society is knowledge. So for Dr. Scott Gershworth, Dr. Priscilla Hobbs, Dr. Brooklyn Ann Weldon, and all of us here at the Nova Society, I'm Dr. Mark Bound. Be well, and we hope to see you again next time.